What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Joe Patrick on football, where today we're going to be just reflecting a little bit more about what happened on Sunday Night Football against the San Francisco 49ers. Kind of go into some specific areas of critique with regards to this offense and Zac Robinson. Since Sunday night and over the course of Monday, I've seen a lot of kind of ranting and raving about Zach, and I don't think that it's without reason, but I do think that I just some of what I'm seeing at least is just a generally broad frustration that's being levied towards him, and I would like to kind of get into at least a couple areas that I've noticed at least where I think that the offense can improve, and that hopefully. Under Zac Robinson, they can get things sorted out in a way that helps Michael Penix because there are some concerning numbers with him. And off the top, we'll get into it, but he is a young quarterback. Like, I'm sure I've gotten out over my skis at times in terms of what the expectations can be for him, what he can provide this offense, and he certainly has tools that can help this offense in ways that other quarterbacks can't necessarily, and that's what is so enticing about him as the quarterback of this team going forward. But there's going to be growing pains, and no quarterback is complete in their first season, certainly, their second season, their third season. In fact, if we look around the NFL right now, and I think that it's worth just kind of sticking to the current crop of quarterbacks because of the way that NFL offenses are evolving in this modern age, we're really not seeing quarterbacks hit their prime years and in terms of production. I feel like until they get kind of into that fifth year, it's kind of funny how it just so happens to kind of coordinate with the contract structure of the rookie contract. And then once they kind of get really into that second contract phase of their career is when they really seem to start figuring it out. Where, the best example this year is obviously Daniel Jones, but we've seen, similar things with regards to guys like Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith to an extent. Lots of different quarterbacks are Sam Darnold, another one, obviously having that real kind of career. In some cases it's a true resurgence. In some cases it's just, really showing, their best as a quarterback, and that really doesn't kind of get until they get into that mid-career style phase. So with Michael Penix, he's obviously not even close to that yet. He's still in essentially his rookie year in terms of the amount of starts that he's had to this point. And so we do have to, I think, temper our expectations and just how efficient he's going to be overall. We can still get really excited based on the things that he can do on any given play, but in terms of how it's going to be down to down, it's just not always going to be exactly how you'd want it and how Zac Robinson would want it. And I think that that's the key point, and we'll get to that in a second. But before we get into some of those critiques, do want to give an injury update for this team. Obviously, a couple big ones happening in that San Francisco game, kind of bookended by some key injuries. Early in the game, Divine Diablo leaves. Raheem Morris confirmed to media on Monday that he has a fracture, presumably in that arm below the elbow. And I read that he was in a sling after the game. That's obviously not good. Raheem Morris called him week to week, and that they hope to get him back before the end of the season, or they look forward to getting him back before the end of the season, I believe was the exact way that he phrased it. But I would assume that this means Divine Diablo is going to probably miss, about 4 weeks. I don't know exactly what the time frame for a broken arm is, and especially with regards to like how soon a player could potentially play with a cast on that arm. But I would think that about a month, and we'll see if he goes on IR, which has not happened as of this recording, which is happening Tuesday in the AM hours. But I would not be surprised to see that ultimately happening for Divine Diablo, and it's a big hit. And we talked about it. I'm not going to go into some of the specifics of what went wrong in the San Francisco game, because I feel like we covered it pretty thoroughly in the instant reaction. I have a lot of the similar opinions that I had at that point, but obviously the drop off without Divine Diablo is quite substantial for this team. Both in the run game, obviously that was kind of the point of focus because of the success that San Francisco was having behind Christian McCaffrey, but I think also in the pass game, you don't get the same kind of coverage that you out of J.D. Bertrand or any of these linebackers on the roster that you get with Divine Diablo, and I think that because of that then filters to Caden Ellis and how you're able to use him. I think it really just kind of limits this defense and Jeff Ulbrich and what he's able to call, because Divine Diablo and Caden Ellis were so interchangeable, with them being both such versatile linebackers. It's a real big blow for this defense, and I worry that it could make them a lot more predictable and therefore less effective. If Caden Ellis is now going to kind of be constrained to doing certain things because he's the only linebacker on the field who's capable of doing them. So that's going to be a problem for this Falcons defense they'll have to work through. The other injury that occurred right toward the end, and we talked about this also on the post game, was Michael Penix, which Raheem Morris said he has a bone bruise. We could see that Penix was limping a little bit after he got kind of rolled up on, although it seems like if it's a bone bruise that, well, I don't know. Bone bruises can be caused due to like kind of tension in a joint and not necessarily like an impact like you think of as like what causes a bruise. But he is expected to play, according to my colleague at 92.9 The Game, Mike Bell. I'm sure they'll talk about that later on Dukes and Bell this week. But certainly something that he's going to have to work through in practice. I would not be surprised if that is limiting him. And Raheem Morris called him day to day in that respect. Didn't ask about Tyler Algier, who I know was also limped off the field at one point, but put his helmet back on and continued playing in the game. I assume he's going to be okay because of that, but who knows? We'll get more information about Tyler Algier later in the week. One other player that was asked about, this isn't really on the injury front, but he is on the absence front. That would be Ray McLeod, who's been kind of, it's kind of been a flashpoint for fans because of the nature of the absence, which seems to be some sort of, I don't know. He's missing because of other. That's what we know, according to the injury report. And Raheem Morris addressed that with media on Monday, saying that his distraction is I'm dealing with and no one else, end quote. So I would say that quote would lead one to believe that there is kind of maybe some sort of like situation between Raheem Morris and Ray McLeod potentially. Don't know. Don't want to really speculate too much beyond that. I know I want to go back and address what Raheem Morris said about Ray on Friday, which kind of addressed a speculative point that I had made, which was it had something to do with Ike Hilliard's firing. I do want to note that after Ike Hilliard was fired, Ray McLeod did speak to media during the practice week that followed, and he was asked about what basically the impact of Ike Hilliard, and he said, and I wish I had the full quote in front of me, but I don't. But anyone can go back and watch it on the Falcons YouTube channel if you just scroll back through the videos and go back to that day. But he said something about it showing that there's no loyalty in this league, basically in the NFL, and which is, that's probably true. I mean, we talk about it kind of being like, it's just the stakes are so high in this league that a player can get cut any given week, a coach could get fired any given week, and as Arthur Smith would say, if that's not something that you're willing to live with, there are lots of other jobs out there. So, which is a kind of a perspective I appreciate. But he also said that Ike Hilliard was the best coach he's ever had. So clearly had an affinity for him. And, and I want to go back to the speculative point that I was making initially was not that necessarily Hilliard's firing caused Ray McLeod to like clash personally, like have like a verbal altercation. I know that has been a rumor that's been going around out there. My speculation was that it just kind of got him in an emotional state that was down and maybe affected practice performances and was not up to the standard that the Falcons expect. And Raheem Morris confirmed in that Friday press conference last week that he sent Ray McLeod home, which I'm sure our listeners know at this point, but just kind of wanted to circle back to that and kind of address that because I know I had talked about it on this podcast previously. So let's get into Zac Robinson and this Falcons offense, which obviously sputtered in a bad way against the San Francisco defense that they really should have been having success against, considering all the injuries that San Francisco had in that game. And you can only imagine how bad it would have been had Nick Bosa and Fred Warner been out there for San Francisco. And the fact that Robert Saleh really seemed to get the better of Zac Robinson. And for me, a lot of it comes down to Michael Penix's numbers under pressure are poor, and we can look at it from in a multiple areas. But in this game against San Francisco, Penix was 0 for 9 according to ESPN Next Gen Stats. I did see one stat that was either during or immediately after the game saying he was 1 for 10. So I think that there was one pass completion that there was some dispute as to whether he was actually under pressure or not. But either way, it's not good, and it's not really a winning formula for your quarterback to be that inefficient. In the case of 0 for 9, not efficient at all, basically. And obviously, Penix is the one who's throwing the ball, and he's the player on the field, so he's got some responsibility there. But when I see numbers like that, I think you have to look at the coordinator and the structure of the passing game and say, okay, well, what is not working here? Because he's obviously a talented quarterback, Michael Penix is, and there's no reason why he shouldn't be able to find receivers if he's under pressure. And I know that there's going to be some discrepancy between under pressure and like actually being blitzed. Those are two, separate things, but they do have some correlation, because obviously when teams bring blitzes, you're going to be more likely to cause pressures. And it brings me to a tweet that Kurt Warner sent out. We all know Kurt Warner is kind of an outspoken and I think very much appreciated by fans voice, kind of critiquing a lot of what's happening in the NFL right now as it goes to coaching and quarterback play. And I think that what he says is always worth noting, whether, player, coach, or fan agrees with him or not. He sent out this tweet at 1:18 a.m. Eastern time, Sunday night or early Monday morning, basically after Sunday Night Football. And I don't know, he doesn't say what caused him to send this tweet out, but he sent a tweet that says, in all caps, have a pressure plan, people. And then he says, the number of times each week in the NFL, yes, in the NFL, that a quarterback misses a hot or a team has to quick throw versus pressure is alarming. How often are we going to let these things waste plays, create negatives, or wreck games? I'll never understand. And I actually suspect that he was not referring to the Falcons-Niners game. I believe he did have some tweets after this, I believe, in which he started immediately kind of going into some other game or games. So I don't know if that's what he was exactly referring to, but I would say that just in my eye, this is a problem for the Falcons, where it felt like to me, San Francisco was bringing some really kind of elaborate designer pressures, some real overloads that were confusing the Falcons, and that is a problem in and of itself. Now, I would say the Falcons, when you look at the numbers, they have actually kept Michael Penix clean relatively a healthy amount. Like, they are generally dealing with some good pressures in a good way. Having said that, or blitzes in a good way, but having said that, when I look back at some of the tape, and I haven't really gone into the whole game, but I was just kind of clicking through a few plays to just kind of get a feel for what was happening on some of these blitzes that Saleh was sending. And I would say that a clear weak point, and this extends back to some things I'd seen on tape earlier in the season, which is Matthew Bergeron is a weakness for this team to this extent, and I think that defensive coordinators are going to continue to exploit his inability to kind of get off of blocks sometimes. I don't want to say that it happens every single time, but I think it happens too often where Bergeron just takes, the front side of a twist and just is not able to get off of that block, and it either allows a twister to come in free, or a delayed blitzer to come in free right through his gap, where he needs to be passing along that block to Nuzul typically, but sometimes it can happen with Matthews, and he just doesn't, and it leaves a huge gap. And so I think that that's one of the reasons why some of these blitzes were working so well. And so I give credit to Saleh too, and just the way that they were designed. He was doing the best with, obviously he didn't just have natural talent out there, so he felt like he had to come up with some of these things, and it was definitely successful. But I do want to just point that out about the Falcons' protections. But when we look at Penix, he was 0 for 9 under pressure versus San Francisco. And then if we even look, and I wanted to say, like, some of the things I was seeing on the tape were just, the pressure coming in and they're not really being anywhere for Penix to go with the ball. And that's why he has such a low completion percentage. Like, what do you expect? Like, if he can't, if no receivers are looking for the ball when you're bringing these pressures, then what are you doing? And I don't want to get too far, like, trying to say what I think is should be proper under these circumstances than that, because uh, the Falcons were prepared for more zone coverage in this game, and they did not get it. Raheem Morris said that when I asked about him about this topic in the press conference, his Monday press conference this week, that they just got a lot more man that they were not prepared for, and I think that that was one of the reasons why um, they were so inefficient when they were getting pressured like this. But if we look toward the entire season, Michael Penix, he's got the fourth worst completion percentage when he's under pressure at 41.4%. He's also fourth worst with an adjusted completion percentage, which I don't remember exactly what the completion percentage number was, but he's also fourth worst in there. There was actually some quarterbacks beneath him that were flipped. But they were not like I think he's fourth above like Cam Ward, Caleb Johnson, or I'm sorry, Caleb Williams, not Caleb Johnson. My colleague had 929. And anyway, some more like inexperienced quarterbacks, basically, which is not ideal. 19th in the NFL in yards per attempt when under pressure. Penix is the league leader in the amount of times he's hit as he's thrown, which makes sense. He's actually the least, or I don't know if he's the least sack quarterback, but he does not take sacks, and that is one of the things that you appreciate about his game. He is able to get rid of the football, and it's one of the reasons why the Falcons' overall offensive numbers when they're under pressure aren't worse, is because Penix does two things really well that help him at this stage of his career and help the Falcons, and that allows him to be a playable quarterback at this stage of his career, which is that he doesn't take sacks and he doesn't turn the ball over typically when he's under pressure. In fact, he's got more turnovers this year when he's not under pressure, just kind of throwing into coverages than he does when he is under pressure. And he also has the sixth lowest scramble rate as well. And the only quarterbacks that he's above with regards to scrambles when he gets pressured are pretty much the exact quarterbacks you would expect: Goff, Stafford, Mac Jones, Sam Darnold, and Joe Flacco. Outside of those, then Michael Penix. And so he really does want to deliver from the pocket. And, I think that means that teams are just going to kind of come at him and probably come at him a lot more. So, again, I don't want to kind of get out over my skis and say, well, this is what's got to be fixed. But I think that it is what has to be fixed. I'm not going to get out over my skis and say how to fix it, basically. But Zac Robinson, as the offensive coordinator of this team, I think has to be looking at this area of the Falcons offense and saying, how do we become more efficient? Because it just feels like have 41% completion percentage when you're under pressure is kind of an unsustainable way to go forward and expect to get the kind of offense that you expect in order to be a successful football team and a football team that ultimately makes the playoffs. One other aspect of this offense that I wanted to talk about that I think has been getting a lot of discussion among Falcons fans before we'll get out of here is Bijan Robinson, obviously not on the field for that 4th and 1 toward the end of the game, which is kind of its own can of worms, and I'm with everybody else, and that seems completely unacceptable. Like, even if you don't have a plan to really get him the ball, certainly you would want to put, as I like Zach Klein put it to Raheem Morris in the Monday's press conference, and Raheem Morris has called Bijan Robinson the best player in the NFL. Why is the best player in the NFL not on the field for you on a key 4th and 1 that is kind of determining, or could be determining, and ultimately was determinative in that game? And Raheem Morris kind of, he said that, they pitched it to him on 3rd and 1, and then they had a natural, basically, sub that was happening at that point for Algier to come into the game. And but ultimately, Raheem Morris kind of did say in what was a mealy-mouthed response that, yes, they probably should have had Bijan Robinson, and probably is an understatement. They definitely should have had Bijan Robinson out there. But let's move on beyond that 4th and 1 and just talk about, there was just lots of discussion about the fact that, he only got, 14 carries in the game, I believe. But he only had 2.9 yards per carry. And I think more concerning He only had a 28.6 success rate rushing in this game. That is obviously way lower than you need it to be, and it's one of the reasons why the Falcons down and distances were just not where they wanted to be all night. When you combine that with some of these numbers we were talking about with Penix earlier, and when you look at the diagram of where he was running the ball, it's Dwayne Ledford stuff. It's all like the outside zone, but you know I don't know. You say Dwayne Ledford's name. I kind of invoke his name as like as if it's on him. I don't think it necessarily is on him, but I do think that with the way that this offense is designed, I'm going to bring up pistol, but it's not necessarily anti-pistol, but it is anti never being under center because I do feel like the lack of being under center is not giving this team an option really to even run the ball between the guards, which by the way is exactly how we saw the 49ers having an incredible amount of success against this Falcons front. And it's a really interesting exercise to look at because these two fronts are kind of they're kind of under the same school. They're both this kind of attack style system. Robert Saleh, Jeff Ulbrich obviously have experience together. They're under the same tree, so to speak. And one of the things that attack style front does is it's really effective against the outside zone blocking. It allows those defenders to get penetration into the backfield and knock the running back off of their what's called a track on that outside zone. And that was very effective for the 49ers in this game against the Falcons. And what the Niners were able to do to counter that was to get under center, or I mean, they stay under. I mean, they have a lot of under center game anyway, but they were able to be under center and hit these quick hitters up the middle. The Falcons can do that, but it's almost like a trick play for them. It's something that we've seen them start to do a little bit more in some of these third, fourth, and one kind of situations, and we saw them do it successfully in this game. They will often use Tyler Algier on almost these like fullback traps and these fullback dives, where it's the only time they really get under center is to either quarterback sneak or to run these kind of quick hitting runs right up the middle between the guards. And it's a shame that the Falcons are not able to really kind of do that kind of thing with Bijan Robinson, because I know we like to think of Bijan Robinson as this, which he is, very agile, the art of the juker kind of running back, but I think he can be very effective with that agility and his ability to finish runs with power, running between the tackles, running up the middle against teams. And I think because they're in pistol as basically their version of being under center, it's so much less effective. And I've seen the TV broadcasts often will talk about this as something they heard from Zac Robinson in their production meetings, which is kind of something that they like about the pistol and running outside zone out of pistol, is that it gets the ball into Bijan Robinson's hands quicker, and that being actually a feature and not a bug of the pistol, and allowing him to basically be able to react to defenders potentially getting in the backfield and make cuts. But I think that it really takes away from the team's ability to run between the tackles because the ball's in his hand quicker. Defenses can just collapse on that run faster, and it makes it so that it's much less viable of a play basically to run. And the San Francisco 49ers can get under center, and defenses kind of have to hold a little bit and be a little bit less decisive on collapsing on that run play because they don't know if there's going to be play action, and they just have a little bit of extra time when that is happening out of pistol, and that's all kind of just there isn't just that same hold time where they have to wait before they can commit. And I think that is restricting some of the versatility of this offense. So, again, the pistol adds a lot of versatility, in terms of the motions that you can use, the ways that you can adjust your protections, which we've talked about in this podcast. And I'm certainly not advocating that the team should go away from the pistol. I just think that there's not really a reason why you can't also incorporate under center game. And I'm surprised to this point that there is almost no under center game for the Falcons offense. So we'll leave it there. Again, those are my critiques of Zac Robinson for this game and what we've seen to this point this season, and we will see if things can improve. And they will have to improve in what is now, again, it's a must-win game against a bad Dolphins team that has their backs up against the wall as well coming up this Sunday. So we'll have more coverage of that as we lead up to it. Again, some injuries for us to watch out for. I'm sure there will be some interesting comments from Zac Robinson, from Raheem Morris, and the rest of the team as well as we geared up for that game on Sunday. Thanks so much for listening in, tuning in. You can catch us on your favorite podcast or whatever podcast catcher you use. Just search Joe Patrick on football. If you want to watch the show on YouTube, it's on 92.9 The Game's YouTube channel, so just search that. And if you are watching us right now on YouTube and you want to see more of them, just click that like button, and that will probably throw you in to the algorithm, and more of these things will pop up. That's basically how most people end up watching whatever videos you watch on YouTube. Is just whatever they show you. So click the like button so you see more of that. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to everybody next time.